Good morning, everyone. My voice is cracking. I'm Jason Githens, Program Manager Lead on the Configuration Manager team, and
I am Mayar Gadiali, and I'm a Program Manager on Config Manager team too.
So today we're going to talk about System Center 2012 Endpoint Protection, do an overview of what's new in Service Pack 1. So our objectives today, we want to first off understand the Microsoft protection stack. It's not just about the anti-malware. It's all the way from the platform up to the protection agent itself through the management side of it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then Mayar's going to take over and talk about the changes that are coming or that have come with System Center 2012 Endpoint Protection Service Pack 1. I'm going to run out of breath if I keep saying that. And then we're going to go in depth into the endpoint protection client itself and talk about how that works. So, and that's the piece that I'll cover in a little bit. So let's just jump right into the comprehensive protection stack that builds on Windows platform security. So this first box you're seeing here is the platform layer. It's effectively, think of this as Windows. The protection built into there are the Internet Explorer, like Smart Screen, for example. There's BitLocker, there's address space layout randomization, UAC, and then there's the three green boxes at the bottom, which are new in Windows 8, and that's UEFI, early launch anti-malware, and measured boot. I'll talk about those in depth later on in the session. So that's the platform level of security. Now let's move into the actual anti-malware client. In the anti-malware client, going from left to right there, you have base anti-malware, behavior monitoring, dynamic translation, vulnerability shielding, Windows Defender Offline, Cloud Clean Restore, early launch anti-malware, and measured boot. The Windows Defender Offline piece, I'll be doing a demo showing a little bit of how you can use that with Configuration Manager later on in the session, so I'll get a little more in depth into that. And I'll be talking about these other components when I get into the deep dive of the client itself. So we'll talk more about these. This is really just putting the pieces together. These are the building blocks of the whole protection stack. And at the management layer, we also have, and I'm talking specifically about the integration of endpoint protection with Configuration Manager here. I want to make sure that, it's not just about anti-malware. Make sure that I get that point across. There are a lot of components of security in the management product itself in Configuration Manager. For example, software updates, plus updates publisher. There's settings management for system hardening as part of that security stack. There's operating system deployment, deploying a secure operating system from the start, and software distribution to deploy and secure your applications. And then there's the MDM stuff to do your devices and secure your devices, also through settings and Exchange Active Sync as well. So that's really the building blocks of the entire security stack that really is protection, defense in depth, we call it. So there's protection all the way up from the base platform in Windows and Internet Explorer, all the way up through the anti-malware client and up to the management service. Oh, it's a cloud conference, and I almost forgot the cloud icon. At the cloud off to the side over there is where your signatures and definitions come from, as well as software updates from Windows Updates. So that's the cloud integration. And I'll talk more about how this first piece, Dynamic Signature Service, when I get into depth in the client, I'll talk more about how that works. So that's a pretty interesting piece as well.
I'll take it over.
Okay, and I'll hand it over to Mayar here.
Thanks. Over the next few slides, I'm going to talk about what we have new for endpoint protection feature and the software update feature. Software update feature is a small part of this. Most of this deck is about the endpoint protection. So to begin with, we made some big architectural changes within the SP1. And one of the big architectural changes was real-time operations for endpoint protection that the admin takes within the console. Malware-driven operations from inside the console. Previously, we used to have a node inside the console that focused primarily on the assets or the computers within your hierarchy or in your environment that showed those computers being infected. But what we did is we took it one step further, and inside this console now we have a new node where you can go and look at all the malware that is infecting your clients inside your system. Next, what we did is we made small changes with regard to the client-side merge for the anti-malware policy. I will get into the details of this a little bit later in one of the slides that I have. We also modified our infrastructure to deliver definitions 3 times a day. Previously, it was limited to 1 time. We had to make some changes on our infrastructure to make sure that since Microsoft publishes definition 3 times a day, that you can push those signatures out also 3 times a day. Again, we realized that Windows Embedded is a big part of the management client space, and we have done some changes in that area. And we have we have a new and improved endpoint protection client, which Jason will talk about in quite some depth, so I will leave it up to him. But the few things that I would like to call out is, like, as an admin, you can control, turn on or turn off the UI on the endpoint, so whether you want the end user to interact with it or not. So that's one policy you can set. The second one is the client is more performant. So real-time operations. I've talked to a lot of customers, and believe me or not, some of them have said that they set the policy polling interval to 3 minutes. And I believe some of you may have done it in the past or may even do it now. The reason why admins want to do it is because they want the client computers to respond really quickly to any changes within the policy updates. And we enable this with a new infrastructure that we call notification services. And using this notification infrastructure, the client can communicate with the server and get the policy from the server within less than a minute. So there is no more policy refresh. There is no more reason to poll the policies. These particular real-time operations are available for the endpoint protection actions that an admin takes within the console. The way this thing works is the client opens a TCP connection and persists it for a while, so it's connected to the MP. And that's how, when an admin takes an action within the console, they immediately, like, say, run a full scan on this particular client, then the scan will start like within 10 seconds. As you can see, we support, there's a list of actions that we support within the console that take advantage of this particular new infrastructure. Lovingly, we internally call this infrastructure as a big green button. It's abbreviated as BGB, and you may even see some of these terms inside the log files if you ever go and look at them. Malware-driven operations. As I said, we have a new node in here. We wanted to make sure that the admin gets to see and takes actions on the stuff that he really cares about inside the console. And that is basically, as soon as the malware is detected on the client, it gets reported into the admin console within less than a minute. And in this particular node that I show you in the screenshot and during the demo, you can take multiple actions on this for this particular malware.
What's cool about that is that, as Meyer touched on earlier, we used to be asset focused. You would have a list of assets and show the infection count on them. What you can do now is really prioritize by threat. So if there's a threat that's really nasty and you want to prioritize remediating that fastest, you can then order that in this list view and take action iteratively against the severity of the threats and have one-stop shop to see the list of threats that are impacting your environment. So you don't have to pivot those off of the device. Yep. You get the direct list of threats right in a primary node in the console.
With that, let me jump into the demo that we have. So in this particular demo, I have 2 Win8 clients, which is one of them is here, right here, and the second one is...
You got to switch.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
We can see it.
So we have one client, which is called the client 2, as you can see up here, in the blue ribbon here. We got another client, and then we have our VM, which is the admin console. What I want to show you here is that I have previously generated some threats on these clients using a magic threat generator tool that we internally use to test this product. And as you can see, these threats were generated on 4.8 as alert level being high, severe. And there are multiple threats for the same kind of, or same category of threats.
This is our new system. This will alert you for a real high severity malware. Yeah. We're really proud of this one. It's SCOM integration.
Oh, boy.
All right, cool. Don't do that again.
No pressure.
That magic threat generator
The
is
threat
there.
generator.
Oh, let's put your demo back on.
Thank you.
I can't wait to read your review comments for this session. Don't ding us for that.
All right, so here's our console. What I wanted to really quickly show you here is that both the clients that I have within this demo environment has already detected and cleaned up and quarantined some threats that were generated previously. These are all fictitious threats. And before I move forward, these threats were generated in the file folder, program files, magic threats, and here's the file name that generated this threat.
Will that be important later?
Yes.
Okay.
So the reason I'm showing you this is because as the demo progresses, you will see what I'm doing here. Let's go over to monitoring node and look at this new node that we created. This is the new node that I talked about. And it shows you all the threats that were detected on any given day or time, how many machines were infected, what was the remediation status of it, and if the remediation status is pending. And once we drill into it, we can see why is it pending too. Let me show you here that this particular threat is kind of a category of threats, and this could be all different versions of that threat. If you want to, as an admin, what do you want to call, exclude this file path from scanning. Let's just say that this is not a threat, but it's actually an LOB app that is being deployed within your enterprise, and for some reason, this is getting detected as a threat. As an admin, you can go click on this file path, say exclude selected files or paths, and when this box comes up, you can just basically, add this file to this particular out here, or you can even say, you can even add a given path, folder path, to this particular, to exclude when scanning.
So then anything in that path will not be scanned
Will not
and
be
quarantined
scanned
again.
and
Okay.
quarantine again.
Cool.
Okay. What other operations you can do out here is, let's say you deployed an HR LOB application which got quarantined on the client machines, and now you have HR calling you, there are a bunch of escalations on your side. As an admin, you can right-click this threat, which is like a false positive for you at this point, and you can allow this threat temporarily within the system, saying, hey, go ahead and ignore this till the signatures get updated for this. When the Microsoft updates the signature and it comes down, going forward, it will not be detected as a threat. But in order to unblock your workforce, what you could do is you can go ahead and say, restore file quarantine by this particular threat. And once you do that, it will say, go ahead, let me just allow the threat first here.
And the difference between allow the threat and exclude a path is really based on if the path is consistent across all of your clients. That's why we order them and number the count here. If the path is consistent, it's safer to exclude the path. The path isn't typically consistent, however, because it's in user context and then it's in a user-based path, and they're going to have every user path going to be separate. There's no way to then exclude, if you have 10,000 users, 10,000 paths. So really the first thing to check if you do need to exclude a threat is look for a consistent path. If it's specifically, if the false positive is explicitly in a particular path that's consistent, you can exclude the path. If that doesn't work, the next step down would be to allow the threat. The threat is the classification, the unique identifier of that threat. It's a little less secure because you're allowing even real threats that are being identified as that to go on, but it does get you back in business if an LOB app has been compromised. So.
And
you can do variables in the path, yes.
so I want to unblock the workforce, so I just go ahead and restore the quarantined files on the client. I click on the restore. I say allow the exclusion of this, allow the threats or exclusion paths first, operations first, before, so that it doesn't get quarantined when you put the file back in there. And once you do this, you can go to the client's operations node and look at the recent operations that were performed. So these are the 2 operations that I performed currently, and you can take actions on this. You can say cancel this operation because it's a mistake, or you can get rid of it from the view here. Let me switch over real quickly to show you what's happening on the client side here.
These also go through that fast channel we talked about, the notification service, so these should happen within a few seconds.
So within a minute or so, you would see that the file is restored back in this particular folder. Where's the alarm when we need it?
This is an early warning system.
Yes.
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
if you don't
please.
mind.
And there you go. As you can see, these files were restored on the machine in this particular folder because of the action that the admin took in the admin console. Yes, sir.
On the other screen where you excluded the file path, I think I heard somebody ask if you could exclude variables, system
Yes.
variables.
And the answer is yes.
Percent, user profile percent.
Exactly.
When you do that, would you just simply backspace and type that path and then
Exactly.
click OK?
Yeah, you would just take, we give you, the path we provide is kind of a starter path, and then you can customize it down to variables in that same string and then add that string in. Yeah.
Then is there somewhere to see all the paths that you've excluded in one
It would
list?
show up in the list down below where you start adding them. Like, let me just show
Would
you.
you show, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So let me go to this. Let's say you wanted to add the path magic thread. And then it gets listed down below here. Is that what your question was? Yes, thank you. Okay.
Is there any notification on the client when the files are restored?
Could you repeat that, please?
No, the question is there no client-side notification of file restoration, and there's not through UI. There is if you go into the client UI and you look at there's a tab that they could find it, but it's not like a pop-up notification or anything.
So let me make sure that we have the right setup here before we proceed. In this previously generated threads, as you can see, this particular thread, that's 7FFF752B, the threat has been kind of computers infected is too, and it hasn't been remediated. The reason it's not remediated, it has been quarantined on the client, but the remediation requires that you do a full scan. And that's why in this column you see 2 clients as pending remediation. If you go ahead, select this particular malware and say view infected clients, it's going to show you the number of clients that are infected. And what it's going to show you is that endpoint protection policy application state has succeeded. It has quarantined that particular threat. And the reason it's pending is because the endpoint protection pending full scan. So if the client performs the full scan and all that operation has been completed, then only this state would go to being successful or the remediation complete. What I can do here is just go ahead and select both these clients. I could do this from the ribbon. I like using the right-click menu here. Just go to Endpoint Protection menu and say Full Scan. And within 10 seconds of this operation, the clients that I have in this system will start the full scan.
Again, I prefer how we used to have to go into the control panel applet and force a policy refresh for these demos, but
yeah,
this is a little bit better than that.
There you
There
go.
you go.
And I bet you it's doing the same for the other clients too. There you have it.
Cool.
Just cancel out of here. Don't want this one.
The question is, what's the impact of the performance of the scan? Client side, a full scan's obviously fairly heavy-handed because it's going to scan every directory. Quick scan just scans the common locations. You can launch either from the console. The performance on the infrastructure is minimized based on the way we architected it, the way that the clients listen and the way that we do prioritization of the clients listening for that command. Basically, as Meyer said earlier, they're perpetually listening to a TCP connection up to the management point, and they're waiting for a command. And when they get that command, they go launch it. So. The question is, will the scan honor the CPU restriction level on the machine? And the answer is yes.
And can that full scan be hidden so that here the client was impacted with malware, and then the full scan pops up on their screen and
Yep.
performance is degraded?
So yeah, absolutely.
What's your best practice? First of all, can that full scan be minimized or hidden? And then would best practice be perhaps to run a full scan after working hours, or what?
We had it open for the demo, but it won't be. It would be a task tray icon otherwise, and it would actually show spinning, but it wouldn't be in the user's face. Yeah, as Meyer mentioned earlier, you can also in this release turn off UI altogether. You can disable the client UI for anti-malware all up, and the user never sees anything, which some people would prefer. The user doesn't even know what's going on. It is all or nothing now, yes. Yeah.
Proceed. All right. We made some more changes in SP1 with regards to client-side merge for anti-malware policies. In previous version, what we had is that an admin had to create monolithic policies, anti-malware policies, and target computers with that. With the SP1, we allow admin to create incremental versions of this policy, and you can target these incremental versions along with the baseline of anti-malware policy to the clients, and the client will merge the two and apply the resultant set of policies on the client. So as an admin, you don't have to keep creating the same set of policies over and over again. By that, to give you an example, let's say you have a default anti-malware policies that are applied to all your clients within the enterprise, but you have an HR group who's using this LOB app that requires you to exclude some file paths out there, and that anti-malware policy for the HR group can be incremental to your baseline, so you don't have to create that HR group policy as a monolithic policy. It still honors priority and merges, so priorities work just the way you are familiar with in the client agent settings policy.
There's I think a hand went up over there.
Yes.
Okay.
What's that?
Ask later.
Okay. So in this slide, I just want to hit the main points. This is for your reference, particularly the architectural changes that we made in order to support 3 times a day definition updates that you can push out using software updates. A feature is that the client can do category-based scan. So it can only ask for definition category scanning against the SUP. Then we can also do the sync between the SUP and the WSUS. This has been there for a while. That can be only Delta. The SUP can say, hey, I have up till update 47. Give me everything after that. And that's how we kind of improved our infrastructure so that you can push out more definition updates 3 times a day. We also allow you, so we heard from customers, the feedback was our security team does not allow us to put any config manager's roles on the internet or connected to the internet. We need them to be secure. The way we work this around, we need to have a connection to Microsoft updates to sync the catalog with the sub roles that we have in the hierarchy. So the way you can work around this is you can have a WSUS in a DMZ. This is just an example. You can go ahead and figure it out in multiple different ways. You can put it in a DMZ that sub talks to the Microsoft update. It can download the updates and catalog sync from there. And then your SUP, the top level SUP, can source from that particular WSUS in your environment. That way all your roles are kind of hidden and behind the firewall. We also have SUP lists. The days are gone where you have just one SUP connected to your primary, the default SUP. We allow you to have multiple SUPs, and I'll get more into that in the next 1 or 2 slides as we go forward. The 2 things that I want to talk about with regards to the SUP list that we've created is, think of it as a fault tolerance scenario. When you have multiple SUPs that are connected to a primary, And when the clients are talking to the designated SUP, if that SUP goes down, then it switches over to the new SUP. So this is a failover scenario. It is not a true load balancing scenario. That is one of the things that I want to get across. And the fault tolerance / failover scenario is it is achieved without an NLB, because now you have multiple SUPs within the for a given primary. If you are using WSUS to push out config manager clients, our recommendation is to use GP preferences. So when you use GP preference, once the client is installed on the machine itself, the GP application will figure out that the client is installed and will stop enforcing that GP policy on the client. So let me touch a little bit about the feature that we created in SP1, what we call as a software update point list. Again, in RTM timeframe, we had only one SUP connected to one primary site. We enabled two main scenarios with this particular feature here. What we wanted to do is basically have SUP support, multiple SUP support within a forest and across untrusted forest. The second scenario is that I already mentioned about is the failover scenario. With the untrusted scenario, the way it works is you have the clients and the server in this forest, and you can create multiple SUPs within the same forest and in the untrusted forest. Today, in our config manager RTM timeframe, distribution point and management point both can be installed in an untrusted forest and can be serviced by a primary in a different forest. So now the SUP role can also be configured in the same way in the SP1 timeframe. As you can see, the clients will continue to talk to their designated SUP, okay? And when that SUP becomes inaccessible, the client tries to contact that SUP 4 times at a 30-minute interval. And once it fails to scan, at that point, it's going to switch over to the new SUP within the forest. If you didn't have a SUP within this forest, and there was a way for this client to find the SUP in the untrusted forest, it would move over to the untrusted forest SUP, if it could, if you had a way to get around that. But it would prefer the SUP within its own forest before moving to the untrusted one. What I want to highlight here is that when there is a switch between the SUPs where the client is scanning, that comes with a price. And the price is in form of basically your client performance and the network cost that you incur because of that. So if a client is talking to SUP 1 and now does a scan, and the next time it goes to SUP 2, it will do a full scan again. And that's going to light up your network, and that's going to cause some performance problems on the client. So as a result, we try to keep the affinity between the SUP and the client as long as the SUP is available for that client. The only time we'll move the client to another SUP is when that SUP is no longer available.
Is there a failback to the original SUP, or do you have to do something manually before it back?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, the question is there failback to the original SUP, and it'll stay affinitized to its new SUP until that one kicks down or goes down. Then it'll switch, then it'll go back to the pool and say, give me a new one, and it may go back to the original, it may go to SUP 3. It's just basically spins the dice on a connection failure. So really over time, what will happen is you'll kind of naturally load balance as if 100,000 clients hit one SUP and 20% of them can't connect, they're going to start failing over to SUP 2. So you just kind of get a natural distribution. You also get a natural distribution on your first client deployment. If you had this configured before you upgraded or installed your client installation is going to basically pick one at install time. So you'll get kind of a natural random distribution at that point. What we're trying to avoid is switching those just haphazardly after they're already assigned to one.
Thanks. So briefly touching on the embedded optimizations that we've done here. We know that there is an explosion of embedded devices, and there is a reason why people want to manage these devices. So we can now install the installation of the endpoint protection client on the embedded system within a maintenance window. We can also install this client on the embedded system either in the overlay temporary file system or you can persist this a client installation in the image itself of the embedded OS by configuring or controlling the right filters on that particular OS. And then, of course, the same goes for the definition updates that are serviced or installed via software update feature, and those can also be committed in the overlay or the temp file system, or can be applied to the image itself. I thank you.
And we also added support back in belatedly for XP embedded.
Yep.
That we had some test runway in this release, and we were able to get XP embedded support back. So,
all right.
So the question is, for systems that roam off CorpNet that can't get to the signature source internally, can they fall back to Microsoft Update for their definitions? And the answer is absolutely. You configure your source order, and they're going to check on a schedule, and when they exceed their whatever value you set for being out of compliance, they're going to start phoning whatever source they can find. They'll hit anything. They'll try Windows Update, they'll try the Malware Protection Center, they'll try your internal source, which they won't be able to get to, so they'll start iterating through the source order. Okay, thanks, Meyer. So I'm going to talk about the client itself. The themes here are the common anti-malware platform across the AM clients that Microsoft uses, the proactive protection against unknown threats, integration with UEFI, trusted and measured boot, and early launch anti-malware, and the reduced complexity while protecting clients, really the user experience there, and the way that we handle definitions and minimize the impact that those definitions have on your network and the performance impact on your clients. So first, the main point of this slide, it's a little bit busy. The main talking point here is that the same malware client that is built into Windows 8 that is part of, the same one used for Windows Intune, Windows Defender Offline. It's the same client. Even Microsoft Security Essentials, it's the same platform. So they're branded differently. They may look differently on your screen, but it's the same client. And by the benefit of that is the amount of data and telemetry we get back from the install base of these clients that allows us to. We have a huge base from which to determine threats, active threats in the environment, and turn around definition updates against those threats based on this ecosystem of clients that's constantly reporting that data up to us. For example, 660 million executions of the malicious software removal tool per month, and over 100 million users on just on Security Essentials. Now with Windows 8 and Defender being baked into Windows 8, then all of the Windows 8 clients will also be part of this matrix of these clients reporting up, providing our researchers this valuable data so that everybody benefits, even whether your System Center endpoint protection, whether your home system on MSE or on Defender. Those are all served by the same definition source and the same research group. So that was the main point of that one. This nightmarish looking thing here is the overall client architecture. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I wanted it in the deck just for your reference in case you had a question on this. But I'll talk briefly about the top left there, where the MGMT and the dotted line is on the top left of the screen. That's really the API that we use to interrogate the client. The way that works is that as events get written to WMI, we are near real-time listening to changes in WMI for the classes related to anti-malware so that we can then get that information back up to the console fast, or back up to the database and hence the console fast, and even into alerts and email if you need it. What we do there is any change event in the security-related classes and the anti-malware-related classes in WMI, we check every 30 seconds to see if anything's changed. On a change event, we send that information back up the wire to the database, to your console, which ends up in your inbox and your email. The whole thing, the SLA for that whole process is under 5 minutes from infection to notification, independent of your size of your hierarchy. On the right-hand side of the screen, under Cloud, is where all the servicing of the client takes place. The line that says Samples, Telemetry, DSS. DSS there is Dynamic Signature Service. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide, but dynamic signature service is our ability to, when we find an unknown threat, something looks fishy, but we don't have a definition for it yet, we can actually pull the Microsoft Active Protection service and get the latest pre-published definition from that service onto that client to get it protected. So we do some telemetry sampling there. We send that up. It checks against known threats that haven't yet been published to Windows Update, and it'll bring down that definition if it needs it. On the bottom of this screen at the kernel level, that's the ELAM, or early launch anti-malware piece I mentioned earlier. That's part of that new UEFI and that boot process, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. And then there's the mini filter driver, file registry process at the kernel level. Then there's network, and that green box above network, sorry, didn't do an animation here, but that green box above network is the network inspection system, which can be serviced through definitions, which will then look at packet level risk or malware in advance of, say, the system being patched for that vulnerability. We can stop the vulnerability, or we can stop the exploit of that vulnerability at the network layer through this network inspection system. So that's just a brief kind of a cross-section of what the client looks like architecturally. So behavior monitoring and dynamic signatures. This is really a regurgitation of what I said briefly on the other slide around how that DSS thing works. The going left to right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, is that the behavior monitoring tracks or identifies something that looks suspicious. It'll send that up to the Microsoft Active Protection Service. The Active Protection Service will do one of two things. It will either say, oh, yeah, I know about this one, I'm going to send you a new definition, or it will say, hey, tell me more, and it'll send a request down for a sample. And then that sample request is submitted up, and the researcher takes a look at the sample request and says, oh, yeah, we got a problem. They're going to update the definition, and the client will get that on its next polling cycle. There's not, this looks like, well, this must take hours. Well, this is really fast. I mean, this is a few seconds, and this is invisible to the user, invisible to the admin. There's nothing you have to do here. This just works.
If they get that off-schedule definition update, does it change their definitions number?
The question is, if they get that off-scheduled or that non-published definition update, does it change their definition version in console or in their UI? And the answer is yes, it would. Okay. All right. Okay. So the main point I want to make about the slide is this dynamic translation with heuristics. The key point here is this emulation process, this emulation-based detection. And the benefit of that, or a couple benefits of that, one is that the heuristics enables one signature to detect thousands of variants. We're looking at the behavior of the malware, how it's traversing the system, what resources it's trying to access, rather than trying to do an exact match of all the variants, which is, with 60 million plus active variants at this point, that's just a fool's errand. There's no way anybody wins doing that. So with this real-time protection driver, the second blue box there, that'll intercept this potential malware, this something we've identified that looks suspicious based on its activity and based on the way the resources it's accessing. It'll do a translation of that, doing dynamic translation in a virtualized environment, in a safe environment. And basically, it's activating the malware to see what it's doing. And then it says, well, it either says, yep, that's malware, that's detected, and it blocks it, or it says, you know, that wasn't so bad. It's not doing anything nasty, so let's let it go. And the virtualized resources there, don't think of that like a VM or anything. That's just basically an emulation of what the malware would do in a contained environment. Cloud Clean Restore. This is new in Service Pack 1 as well. And the benefit of this is that it's an advanced system and file cleaning using the Microsoft Symbol Store. That sounded pretty geeky. What does that mean? The Microsoft Symbol Store is a repository of key operating system files that if they get corrupted, the anti-malware solution, Endpoint Protection, can make a call to the Symbol Store and download a new component of that new file and replace it on the system. So these are system files. These are core Windows files. And if any one of those were to get compromised, we identify that through a real-time protection or scan-based detection, and we can go make a call up to the Symbol Store and replace that file. Now, updating a Windows file, there's a good chance a restart's going to be required there. So we also notify the user that, hey, something, malware detection has happened and you need to restart your system. So they'll get that UI notification that they need to restart their system. We don't just reboot them, which is good. So that's pretty much the Cloud Clean Restore feature that's been added in this release. Trusted and measured boot with UEFI. So UEFI, you think of UEFI, it's really a hardware standard that's really replacing that dusty old BIOS thing that's been around forever. Trusted boot it's effectively, it minimizes the impact that you have of malware getting into the system during the bootloader phase. It also forces the anti-malware service to start in advance as the first service to start before drivers are even loaded. The benefit of that is that malware can't sneak in that bootloader phase, which potentially it could before, and then it's hidden, then it can hide itself, and you're never going to find it. No anti-malware solution can find it if it gets embedded. Oh, this is a wonderful room. Meyer, did you hit the switch?
Yeah.
Please put your phone down. Okay. So the anti-malware can load. I've got a diagram of this next. I'll let that speak to the whole process. But that's really what trusted boot is that you know from power on, from that moment of power on, that you're in a trusted bootloader process all the way through full OS load. There's also measured boot. Well, is measured boot on the next slide, or is it that one? Okay. Measured boot is effectively writing to TPM the results of that entire boot process. So if anything suspicious happens during the boot process, it's written to TPM, and TPM then has a record of anything that looks risky or fishy in the boot process. Oh, there it is. It was an animation. So that just spoke to that one. So this is a trusted boot comparison of Windows 7 to Windows 8. And the key point, the key difference here is these red boxes versus the green arrows and the red arrows here. So in the Windows 7 example above, the risk here is that, an OS loader, malware can hide during this phase, and it can really, like I said earlier, can embed itself in the OS before the OS loads during this window of risk, this red period, this OS loader and third-party driver instantiation. So once that can all happen before the anti-malware client even starts, and malware can embed itself in that process, and you're not going to find it. That's the rootkit example as an example. And then, so by comparison, look at the Windows 8 process here. It says, oh.
I'll give it away to you. Here. Huh? Let me just put it here. It's not me who's doing it.
Yeah. Meyer did this again. So this is what happens in Windows 8 when you get malware in the boot process. This warning voice comes on in your office, and you... They did apologize, and it was a minor one this time. Apparently the last one was a major event. We have no idea what's going on out there. We're just trusting that it's a faulty alarm.
It's a false positive.
It's false positive, yeah. We can restore it. It's really hard to stay on track of what the heck I was talking about. So, but the main thing in the context of this endpoint protection discussion is this early launch anti-malware driver launch is something that we integrated endpoint protection into. So that sounds, any change in the room I get nervous about now. And also Windows can start the AM software before even the third-party boot drivers happen. So these two little certificate icons here are basically signed secure processes now as compared to, don't you go to sleep. Do you want to unlock your laptop for me? So that's the trusted boot process. Now measured boot, there's a lot of tape measures on this screen, but the main point I want to get across here is that measured boot is oh, again, review scores, we have no control over this. If you hated the presentation, that's fine. Ding us on that, but the lights and the voice from above. So these measuring tapes on the screen are really just meant to say that each of these steps in the Windows 8 example down here, each of the UEFI steps, Windows 8 loader, kernel and drivers, anti-malware software, those are all being recorded, and they're written to TPM that can be used later for, say, attestation. You could use the results of that to grant or deny access to a file server, for example, or deny access to other corporate resources. BitLocker is not required for this process. TPM needs to be there. TPM, from a hardware standpoint, it has to be TPM, but BitLocker itself is not required for this to work. I mentioned the remote attestation piece. Now, we have the capability. We don't do it currently with endpoint protection, but you could write the results out remotely and store them there and have the results saved off to a service somewhere. But right now we do basically do manual attestation or local attestation of the results through endpoint protection. So we do check the results as part of measured boot after we boot, but the results are stored locally. So it's not as secure as it would be if we wrote it up to the service or to a service or a remote server. This is just wonderful. So protect clients with reduced complexity. This is basically just saying that the UI does not blow the end user's mind. It's pretty simple, and the tabs there are pretty easy to understand. The main part I wanted to talk about here is on the bottom right to show that our signature updates are very reasonable in size. If you're staying on track, if you're getting your 3 times a day, you're getting, less than half a meg of definition updates on that schedule. So if you're staying on track, you're just getting these, basically these binary delta files of the latest definition update. If you miss 3 days, you need to get a delta signature. It's still not a full signature update, but it does want to go back and for the last point it checked in and bring the difference back in at that point. So that's going to be a little bit bigger. You're talking around 5 megs for that process. And if you missed a full update or it's a new machine or you've been offline for 31 plus days, you're going to get the full meal deal. And that full meal deal is about an 80 meg file, the full definition and engine updates. So it's really just about a factor of time. If you're staying current, you're going to get these fractional files. Also using software updates and configuration manager. These are delivered locally through your configuration manager infrastructure, so you're not pounding the network for these things. Then you can, the other point I wanted to make here is that we have CPU throttling during scans, and we actually got an award about a year ago from AV Test for best usability, which basically means highest performer or best performing anti-malware client in the industry. So through the way we've designed it to not frustrate and impact users, and go back to that, if you go back to that Brett slide of all the clients or all the platforms this client sits on, we have to be super careful with that because we can't have someone have a terrible Windows experience because our AM client is taking up all the resources. So we put a lot of effort into minimizing the performance impact on the client itself. We also have support for a heterogeneous platform, so we're no longer just a Windows protection. We have a client for Apple, for Mac specifically. We have Linux Server, Red Hat Enterprise 6. And we also have Linux protection. The Mac version, as it says here, 10.6, 10.7. With CU1, that also includes 10.8. So that is the latest version of Mac. The caveats, particularly on the Mac side to mention, is that in this release, we don't have management. You can deploy the client, but we don't actually have an active management agent that's returning results back. So it's protection, but it's not pure management, or it's not full management. You can get the client out there, but you can't necessarily, you can't get state back up into config manager from that Mac client. You can, however, get some protection for the Linux client through operations manager. So there is a path to Linux protection and management and surfacing those results back. And to close, I have no idea where we are in time because we've had a couple of interruptions. But we do actually have some time left. So what I want to do here, and it'd be helpful if I could over to the demo. That didn't set off the alarm. So what I want to talk about here is, I was trying to think of a good demo that maybe you hadn't seen before that could really demonstrate what I think is the real value of the way we've done endpoint protection, and that's really around the operationalization of security. And that sounds like a super geeky term, but basically what that means is that we want to take the value of a managed endpoint protection client, and I want to make sure that everyone understands how that integrates into Config Manager in some unique ways, that the unique capabilities of Config Manager in general help service that end-to-end security story. So I tried to think of what are the most number of components I can hit in a demo to demonstrate that Config Manager existing tools and features can be used in parallel or in concert with endpoint protection to show that there's a lot of power here, and a lot of power is built up to your imagination to figure out how to bring these things together, or demos like this. So the one I'm going to start with, or the one I decided to show, is one I actually have a blog on. So I'm not going to go through every step in the demo just in the interest of time. There's a blog on it, and all my blogs are linked in this deck, and there's a blog on using this doing this thing end to end. But what I'm going to show here is delivering Windows Defender offline for that, primarily for like rootkits. And if we scan a client and we find malware that requires you to run a scan in WinPE, we will notify you and say offline scan required in our console. So what we can do there is that, you can download this free Windows Defender offline tool. If without Config Manager, you have to put that thing on a USB and go boot the machine from USB to get this Windows Defender offline thing to run. Well, I was sitting in my office one day. I was thinking, well, who's going to do that? I mean, we have these management tools. Who's going to walk around with USB and do this Defender offline scan? Because I saw this in my demo, or one of my in our dog food environment. I saw like 3 machines that required offline scan. I'm like, well, how do we clean those? And then I thought, well, we have OSD. This is just a WIM. So let me see if I can use OS deployment to deliver the WIM that's going to run Windows Defender offline scan. And we pulled it off. So this is a documented process, but I just wanted to run through that and how you could bring this better together story with Config Manager and endpoint protection. So the first simple step here is I'm just going to, well, I say simple as I just paste this long string into the command window, but this is all documented and pretty easy to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is what I've done in advance of this, just in the interest of time, is I've already downloaded the latest Windows Defender offline WIM. It's just an image, it's an installer package. You download it, you execute it, it extracts the contents, you grab the boot WIM out of it, and that's the WIM that we're working with here. So if I run this, that's basically going to mount the WIM and extract it in a way that I can modify the file structure. So once that runs, once that completes, what I'm able to do, and the reason I have to do this is I have to put the latest definition into this WIM so that when it runs in WinPE, it has a local definition to use to do that WinPE cleaning. Because obviously WinPE, it's not going to be able to go out to Windows Update and get, or even your local software update point and get the latest definition. So you have to embed that into the WIM itself. So it's a pretty easy process to do that, and you can automate this whole thing. I'm just doing it manually to demo it. But once I've mounted this WIM, if I go over here to WDO new, or sorry, wrong folder, and scroll up and hurry before that alarm starts again. So if I go to WDO mount, then I'll get the contents of that WIM, and I've already put it in there, but I'll just show you. There's this redistributable definition file, which is available for download from Microsoft, just from Microsoft, and there's a source in my blog on how to do that. You can do that with a scheduled task and have it pull this definition file down every, 3 times a day or however often you need it. You just simply paste that in there, close this window, and then you just cheat and grab my command line that's already on here. Then I'm just going to basically unmount the WIM, commit those changes, and now I've got a WIM that has the definition in it. I can now deploy that through OSD to any client that happens to require an offline scan. Well, how can you automate that process? Okay, so this is where you can cut over to collection logic. So if I go to my device collections, I've already done this in advance. If I go to my device collections, go to properties, and see this magic window that I need to drag down for the resolution. If I go to my membership rules, edit, and this is way too many clicks to get to the piece I need, but So I'm just going to edit my query statement just to show you where we do this. So the criteria, and I edit that, then I select. So basically that was about 47 clicks to get to the screen that matters. And the screen that matters is basically building a collection, a dynamic collection, that the fast resolve collection. So it's basically every few minutes it's going to add members to it based on an anti-malware state. So in this particular, since all of our classes of WMI infection status are exposed and they're in the provider, they're exposed in the console, you can get to them as a collection, as a piece of collection logic. So what I've done here is that I've just picked anti-malware infection status, a pending offline scan. Meyer showed earlier that you could do full scan from the console as well. We also kept your full scan state, so you could automate that too. You could just have a script that runs full scan selectively on a client based on it being in a collection where that has this particular problem. So you don't have to stare at your console all day, and when a client comes in that needs a full scan, you don't have to go right-click and do it. You just let the whole collection logic process do that for you. So, but I'm going to stick with this and keep pending offline scan. And let me cut over real quick to my client and generate and I'll show you this tool that Meyer mentioned earlier, this magic threat thing. So let me cut over to let me minimize this. I don't need this window anymore. And launch this magic threat generator. And oh yeah, I am projecting because I haven't switched. Okay, cool. So here we go. So I'm going to generate this is a code name of what it used to be called. The Windows Defender Offline was Callisto as a code name. So I'm going to generate a Callisto threat, which will generate that Windows Defender Offline threat. So I'll start that and get that process started. So it'll find it'll find the client, the malware solution, endpoint protection. We'll clean that off the client, and we'll let that run. And I'm going to run back, cut back over to my site server. So we cancel back out of this. And really what's going to happen here is this collection, since it's a fast collection, in not too long it will generate, that'll populate that client by being in that offline scan required state will show up in this collection. But let me show you a little bit, while we wait on that to happen, let me just show you how the next steps involved in this whole deployment of Windows Defender Offline. Again, this is just meant to showcase all the capabilities of the management product that can be used in parallel with the security, with endpoint protection, to really provide that defense in depth. And it's pretty easy to do this stuff. So the next thing I would do here, and I've already done it just again in the interest of time, is I would import that Defender Offline WIM that I created through that mount and unmount process. And so I just imported it into the boot images here. And then I create my task sequence. It's a really simple task sequence. Let me edit it and I can show you. Oh boy. And I've gone full screen. Actually, little demo problems don't matter after you've stood up here and listened to the alarm going off for 15 minutes. So all you do here is the key line to point out here is what you're running in WinPE. You're running this offline scanner shell.exe/autoscan. That's launching Defender Offline in WinPE. And it's referencing the definition that you injected into the image through that mount and unmount process. That's really all it does. This will hit the client. The client will get the pop-up, the user will get the pop-up and say, hey, you need to do this thing, and they'll do it. They'll boot into WinPE, it will scan in WinPE, and then it'll clean off that rootkit, and then back into full OS, and off you go. That will also clear the state of the offline scan required. The client will drop out of that collection, and it will also drop out of monitoring that it has this problem. So I'm going to cancel that. Say again. Well, you wouldn't update the definitions in the task sequence. The question is, would you update the definition in the task sequence? You wouldn't. You would actually update the definitions in the WIM by mounting it, injecting them in there, and then unmounting it. The executable's built into the Defender Offline WIM. That's the WIM you download. The only thing you're adding to that executable knows to check a path, the root of the WIM. For the definition executable. Yeah. It will, I don't know if I have time to show it, but it basically launches the same UI experience that you would see in the full OS in a WinPE phase. So yes, it will show you what it's detecting, what it's cleaning, and then that will be in the UI, and then that would be reported up as well. Yeah. So let me go see if my collection populated. For some reason, I just have a feeling it's not, just based on the way things have gone today. Let me refresh this. No clients in there. Okay. Well, let me cut back to my client and see if it actually detected that threat. Something ran. Let's see. I think that, yeah, 9:32, it found something and quarantined it. Let's go back one more real quick to the server. Just see if that populated. Come on. There we go. So now Melissa PC's in this collection. I'm almost out of time. I'm getting the lightsaber waving in the back, so let me do this quickly. I'll move it right along, Luke. So if we go to the Melissa PC here, it's now in this collection of Defender Offline required. And again, that was set up to be a fast collection, so it populated right away. The client will now get this policy that it needs to run Defender Offline scan as a task sequence. But through the magic of the notification server that we talked about earlier, I could force this to run right now by client notification, download computer policy. I've just basically initiated a control panel action to refresh machine policy on the client, but remotely from my admin console. So it basically through that same TCP connection that Meyer showed the endpoint protection action launching against, I've just forced a general policy refresh on the client. So when I come back to it, I should have a pop-up of my clients or of a new package available. I should. We'll give that a second. It's not really all that exciting. It basically just says there's something new in Software Center for you to run. And when I launch that, would basically run the whole task sequence, the UI that does the iterative build of the line of the blue progress bar, and then I'll boot into WinPE. WinPE, I'll start up a task sequence. You'll have the config manager splash screen behind you, and then you'll launch the client UI. So that's basically all that it does. I'll cut back to the deck. I know, what is our time? Okay. So the key takeaways, we want to talk about the protection stack, which we covered at the beginning. Meyer walked you through what's new specifically in Endpoint Protection Service Pack 1. The hotel has a good alarm system. We learned that. I don't know how good it is, but none of us moved. Understanding the endpoint protection client and the benefits of operationalized security. That was really the point of today, so I hope you leave with a better clarity on all those points. Particularly, particularly leave with the point to think of the clever ways you can bring config manager and endpoint protection together to automate a lot of key security stuff that you have to deal with. Online resources. This is a load of blogs that I've written over the past year or so, as well as how-to videos, product documentation. One thing I didn't even talk about today was the Security and Compliance Manager. These are these are configuration packs you can import into Config Manager to have baseline recommended security baselines for all platforms and products that Microsoft creates. That could be Windows 7, Windows 8, IIS. You can import those and apply those through DCM to your clients. And there's just a load of stuff on here, a combination of software updates and endpoint protection stuff. And then, whoa, that went fast. Okay, it's just going to play. This is wonderful. Okay, and then this one says appendix.
Thank you.
And the others ones just said there's a bunch of other sessions to go to, but it's Thursday, so there's probably too late to go to those. So that's pretty much what we had to present, and we'd be happy to take any questions you guys have. Thanks for sitting with us through the alarm and everything else that happened today, and the fan going out and all the other deals. But appreciate your time.